90% of riders who complain about arm pump, carpal tunnel syndrome, and hand numbness are blaming their suspension, their fork oil weight, or the sweep of their handlebars. They spend thousands of dollars on custom triple trees and steering dampers, completely blind to the fact that the actual culprit is a millimeter-thick piece of garbage they bought because it looked cool on an Instagram feed. Dealerships and aftermarket catalogs are actively, knowingly selling you hand grips that are medically destructive to your ulnar and median nerves. The motorcycle grip industry is a racket, plain and simple. Decades ago, they figured out that instead of formulating high-grade thermoplastic elastomers to absorb high-frequency engine vibration, they could just machine cheap aluminum, pour unstable polyurethane into a mold, slap a shiny logo on it, charge you upwards of $100, and leave you with hands that go numb after just 30 miles of riding. Today, I am tearing apart the 5 biggest lies currently sitting on your local parts counter. I am going to expose exactly how these brands are scamming you, why their materials fail catastrophically, and how they trick buyers into opening their wallets. And when we are done examining that trash, I am going to reveal the only 2 grip brands that professional mechanics, endurance racers, and people who actually ride their bikes hard trust to bolt onto their handlebars. You have seen these first offenders everywhere. You might even have them on your bike right now if you bought it used from a guy who thought he was building a custom chopper out of a Honda Shadow. I am talking about the generic spiked metal grips flooding Amazon and eBay under random strings of capital letters. They cost $25. They look like medieval torture devices, and that is exactly how they treat your hands. Let's talk about the horrific mechanical reality of bolting a solid chunk of low-grade cast zinc aluminum alloy to your handlebars. Your handlebars act exactly like a tuning fork. Every combustion event in your engine cylinders, every imperfection in the asphalt, every harsh bottom out of your front suspension travels up the fork tubes, into the triple clamps, and directly into the bars. A solid metal grip takes that violent kinetic energy and transfers it with zero impedance straight into your metacarpal bones. You are willingly holding on to a vibrating jackhammer. You might as well just grab the bare steel tube. But the physical pain and the inevitable joint damage aren't even the worst parts of this setup. These cheap grips use a built-in integrated throttle tube made of the exact same porous, low-grade pot metal. Do you know what happens mechanically when cheap pot metal rubs against a raw steel or aluminum handlebar? It galls. The microscopic imperfections in the metal catch on each other. It creates friction dust and burrs. Within a month of riding, that throttle tube is going to start sticking. You will roll on the gas to pass a truck, let go of the grip, and the throttle will just stay wide open. I have literally had bikes on my lift that were deemed total losses by the insurance company because the rider stuffed the bike into a guardrail when their $25 spiked grip bound up on the bar and wouldn't return to idle. And let's not ignore the spike itself. Having a sharp metal protrusion sitting exactly where your jacket sleeve or glove cuff naturally falls is a recipe for getting snagged when you need to make an emergency evasive maneuver. These grips are a catastrophic failure of basic motorcycle engineering, disguised as a tough guy cosmetic upgrade. They are dangerous, they are useless, and they belong in the scrap bin. Let's move to the opposite end of the spectrum and talk about the hipster trap. Biltwell. Biltwell makes some decent helmets, I will give them that, but their rubber grips are a masterclass in how to sell you a recurring subscription to cheap, failing rubber. You walk into any trendy motorcycle shop and you see these colorful, retro-looking grips hanging on the pegboard for $20. The thruster, the recoil, the kung fu models. They feel soft in the package. They look absolutely great on a custom scrambler, a cafe racer, or a stripped-down Sportster. So you buy them. Here is the dirty chemical secret about the compound Biltwell uses for these grips. It is a highly unstable, low-grade thermoplastic polyurethane that has absolutely zero structural resistance to ultraviolet radiation, ozone, or the natural oils and sweat generated by human skin. They feel great for the first 3 weeks, but leave your bike parked outside in the summer sun a few times, and the molecular structure of that rubber begins to fundamentally break down. It undergoes a chemical process called polymer reversion. The rubber literally turns back into a sticky, tar-like glue. You will go out to your bike, grab your handlebars, and your expensive leather gloves will literally stick to the grips. It leaves a disgusting, gummy black residue all over your palms that you need harsh solvents like brake cleaner to wash off. I have peeled hundreds of these off customer bikes, and you can't even slide them off with compressed air like a normal grip. You have to slice them and scrape them off with a razor blade and a wire wheel because they have melted and bonded onto the steel. And before they melt into a puddle of goo, they do virtually nothing to dampen engine vibration because the rubber is dense and the profile is too thin. You are paying $20 for an aesthetic accessory that has a hard expiration date of one hot summer. The motorcycle forums are filled with guys complaining about black sludge ruining their gloves, and the brand's apologists will just tell you to buy another pair because they are so cheap. That is not a feature. That is a manufacturing defect being aggressively sold to you as a consumable part. Stop buying them. Now we get to the boomer touring crowd and the false idol of comfort, Avon memory foam grips. These retail for around $60 to $80, and they promise the ultimate ergonomic luxury for the long-distance rider. The marketing pitch sounds incredibly convincing. Memory foam that contours to your exact hand shape, eliminating pressure points and absorbing all road shock. It sounds like a high-end mattress commercial, and it is just as full of garbage when applied to a motorcycle. Let me explain exactly why memory foam is the absolute worst possible material to put on the controls of a vehicle exposed to the harsh elements. Memory foam is, by definition, an open-cell polyurethane structure. Open cell means it acts exactly like a kitchen sponge. When you are riding on a hot day in July, your hands sweat inside your gloves. That sweat is absorbed directly into the grip. If you ride in the rain or even just wash your bike, the grips soak up water until they are fully saturated. You are now holding onto a wet, squishy sponge that takes 3 days to dry out. But the moisture isn't just annoying, it is destructive. Human sweat is acidic. It contains salts, skin cells, and natural oils. When those organic compounds get trapped inside the open cellular structure of the foam, they start a rapid and aggressive degradation process. The foam loses its elasticity. It begins to flake off in chunks. It dry rots from the inside out. Within a single riding season, your expensive premium ergonomic grips look like a feral dog chewed on them. Furthermore, foam provides a dangerous lack of support. A motorcycle grip needs to translate your physical inputs directly to the steering axis. When you need to make a sudden, aggressive steering input to avoid a pothole or a car pulling out in front of you, the memory foam compresses completely before it translates your force to the handlebar. You lose direct tactile feedback with the front wheel. The grip feels vague, mushy, and disconnected. You are actively sacrificing steering precision, dealing with waterlogged controls, and paying a premium for a material that belongs inside a cheap pillow, not on the primary steering interface of a moving motorcycle. We cannot talk about the cruiser tax without exposing the undisputed king of aftermarket scams, the Kuryakyn ISO grip. These atrocious things have been around for decades. You go into any metric cruiser or Harley-Davidson dealership, and the parts counter guy will inevitably try to upsell you a set of ISO grips for $90 to $120. They look heavy. They are covered in thick chrome, and they feature these raised, isolated rubber pads that supposedly absorb vibration. The harsh reality is that these grips are an anatomical nightmare and a mechanical joke. First of all, let's look at the construction. The core of the grip is a hollow aluminum and zinc alloy shell heavily plated in chrome. By making the grip a hollow metal cylinder, Kuryakyn has actually created an acoustic resonance chamber. Instead of dampening the low-frequency vibrations of a massive V-twin engine, the hollow metal body amplifies them. The vibration travels up the bar, hits the metal shell, and rings like a bell in your hands. But what about those magic rubber pads? They are far too hard and dense to absorb any meaningful kinetic energy. They are just cheap pieces of rubber glued into slots cut out of the metal housing. And guess what happens to that industrial glue after a year of engine heat, UV exposure, and constant gripping force? It fails completely. The rubber pads start peeling back and falling out one by one while you are riding down the highway. And when a pad falls out, your hand is forced to rest directly on the sharp, stamped edge of the chrome cutout. And let's talk about that chrome. It is notoriously thin and applied over poorly prepped zinc die castings. It pits, bubbles, and flakes within a couple of years of normal use, leaving you with jagged edges of peeling metal that can actually cut through a thin leather glove. These grips are excessively heavy. They make the handlebar feel incredibly fat and unwieldy, they amplify the exact vibrations they claim to eliminate, and they literally fall apart under normal conditions. The fact that dealerships still push these as a premium comfort upgrade is borderline criminal. It is a triumph of marketing over engineering. I have saved the absolute most offensive brand for last because it perfectly encapsulates everything wrong with the modern aftermarket parts industry. Rizoma, specifically their Sport and Luxe lines of aluminum grips. These retail for upwards of $120 to $150, sometimes more depending on the finish. You see them bolted onto high-end Ducati Monsters, Triumph Speed Triples, and expensive custom cafe racer builds. The CNC machining is undeniably beautiful. The anodizing is flawless. They look like they belong in a modern art gallery. And that is exactly where they should stay, because putting them on a motorcycle you actually intend to ride is an act of pure masochism. When you buy a Rizoma grip, you are paying top dollar for a beautifully crafted instrument of permanent nerve damage. Almost the entire surface of the grip is raw, rigid billet aluminum with maybe a microscopic, paper-thin strip of hard rubber that serves absolutely no structural or dampening purpose. Let me state a basic fact of physics. Aluminum does not absorb energy, it transmits it. High-performance motorcycle engines, especially inline fours and high-compression twins, generate high-frequency, high-amplitude vibrations. When you wrap your hands tightly around a billet aluminum grip, every single one of those microscopic vibrations travels directly into the ulnar nerve running down the outside of your hand and the median nerve right in the center of your palm. This continuous assault causes a medical condition known as white finger syndrome, or hand-arm vibration syndrome. Your capillaries constrict, your fingers go completely numb. You lose fine motor control of the brake lever. And over time, you can cause permanent, irreversible neurological damage to your hands. Mechanics despise these grips. When a customer brings in a bike with Rizoma grips complaining about a harsh ride, front-end chatter, or numb hands, I don't even look at the fork valving or the tire pressure. I tell them to take off the $150 jewelry and put a real set of grips on. Rizoma proves that a high price tag and aerospace-grade machining do not equal a functional motorcycle part. They have actively prioritized looking expensive over the fundamental biological reality of human hands gripping a vibrating machine. It is a premium-priced scam wrapped in beautifully anodized billet aluminum. So, if 90% of the aftermarket is aggressively selling you melting rubber, waterlogged sponges, hollow chrome resonance chambers, and nerve-destroying billet metal, what are you actually supposed to use? What is the solution? To answer that, you have to understand that a motorcycle grip has only two critical jobs. First, it must act as an elastomeric isolator, creating a mechanical buffer zone between the resonant frequency of the steel or aluminum handlebar and the fragile bones in your hand. Second, it must provide absolute tactile friction so that you can hold the throttle open and manipulate the bars with zero muscular tension in your forearm. If you have to squeeze the grip tightly just to keep your hand from slipping backward, you are inducing arm pump and fatigue. You need a grip that inherently holds onto your glove, rather than forcing you to hold onto it. When you look at what professional endurance racers, Dakar, rally riders, and master mechanics actually use on their personal machines, you don't see chrome. You don't see billet aluminum. And you certainly don't see $100 price tags. You see proprietary synthetic compounds developed in actual chemical laboratories. Here are the only two grip brands you ever need to consider buying. The first brand that will actually save your wrists, cure your hand numbness, and transform the way your bike feels is ProGrip. Specifically their 714 Dual Sport grips or their 719 Gel Street grips. ProGrip is a dedicated Italian company that doesn't blow their budget on fancy cardboard packaging, full-page magazine ads, or sponsoring lifestyle Instagram influencers. They spend their money on chemical engineering and polymer research. A set of ProGrips costs about $18 to $20. Yes, let that sink in. Less than a quarter of what you would pay for those garbage Rizomas or Kuryakins. What makes ProGrip fundamentally superior is their proprietary gel compound. They do not use cheap polyurethane or basic vulcanized rubber that degrades in the sun. They use a highly specific thermoplastic elastomer that is engineered at the molecular level to absorb microscopic, high-frequency kinetic energy. The 714 is absolutely legendary in the adventure bike and dual sport community because of its unique structural profile. It is slightly thicker in the palm swell to fit the natural curve of your hand, and it features a deep, aggressive waffle-like pattern. This pattern is not just for looks. It allows the surface of the grip to physically compress and move independently of the rigid inner sleeve. It acts exactly like a micro-suspension system for your hands. When the handlebar vibrates, the internal structure of the grip absorbs the shockwave before it ever reaches your palm. The 719 Street Grip is just as brilliant, utilizing a highly advanced dual-density extrusion process. They inject a hard, rigid compound against the inner core so the grip firmly bites onto the steel handlebar, ensuring it never twists or slides off when you are accelerating. Then they overmold that core with an incredibly soft, tacky outer gel layer. This outer layer is chemically formulated to resist ultraviolet degradation, ozone cracking, and petroleum products. You can accidentally spill .4 brake fluid on a Pro Grip, wipe it off with a rag, and the material won't melt or distort. More importantly, the inherent tackiness of the gel means you can ride with an open, relaxed palm. The grip naturally sticks to the leather or synthetic textile of your riding glove. You instantly stop death gripping the bars, your forearm muscles finally relax, and the debilitating arm pump completely disappears. It is pure, function-driven engineering for under $20, and it will outlast grips that cost 5 times as much. If you are riding a sport bike, a naked street fighter, or if you regularly do track days, there is only one brand that belongs anywhere near your clip-ons. Domino. Another Italian manufacturer, but one with a racing pedigree that the billet aluminum pushers could only dream of. Domino grips are the absolute gold standard in the MotoGP and Moto2 World Championship paddocks. The grips you buy for $25 online are the exact same grips being run on 250 horsepower prototype race bikes ridden by world champions. Domino's secret weapon is their A360 and MotoGP compound grips. Like Pro Grip, Domino utilizes a highly sophisticated dual compound injection molding process. But they tune the durometer, which is the measurement of the hardness of the rubber, specifically for extreme dynamic control and feedback. The inner core is a dense, high durometer thermoplastic that is engineered with specific safety wire grooves. Professional mechanics and racers don't trust grip glue alone. We safety wire our grips to the bars to ensure zero rotational slip. Domino molds deep, precise channels into the inner flange and the outer end of the grip so the stainless steel safety wire sits perfectly flush and doesn't dig into the rider's thumb webbing. But the real magic happens at the outer contact patch. Domino uses a patented micropyramid texture across the entire gripping surface. Instead of using deep, soft ridges that can fold over or squirm under hard braking, the micropyramids provide hundreds of tiny, ultra-stable contact points. When you are hanging off the side of the motorcycle, braking aggressively from 150 miles an hour, you are putting a massive amount of forward shear force into the grip. The Domino grip absolutely does not squirm. It does not compress unevenly. It gives you a rock-solid, direct mechanical connection to the front tire's contact patch, allowing you to feel exactly what the front suspension is doing, while the specific chemical compound still manages to filter out the high-frequency engine buzz that causes fatigue. The rubber is designed to wear incredibly slowly. It is utterly impervious to human sweat, and it never becomes sticky or tacky, even after days sitting in the blazing sun. It remains perfectly consistent whether you are riding in 50-degree autumn weather or a 100-degree track day. When you buy a set of Domino grips, you are paying $25 for decades of telemetry data and ergonomic feedback from the fastest, most demanding motorcycle riders on the planet. Stop letting aftermarket catalogs and uninformed parts counter salesmen dictate what goes on your motorcycle. Your hands are the single most important control interface you have with the machine. Everything from your throttle application to your emergency braking depends entirely on your grip. Stop paying hundreds of dollars for chunks of machined metal that literally destroy your nervous system. Stop buying cheap novelty rubber that turns into a sticky, unmanageable glue. And stop falling for the marketing hype of water-absorbing foam and hollow chrome tubes. Do yourself a favor. Go out to the garage, take a razor blade, And cut those overpriced, poorly engineered medieval torture devices off your handlebars tonight. Throw them in the trash where they belong. Spend $20 on a set of Pro Grips or $25 on a set of Dominoes. Clean your bars thoroughly with contact cleaner. Use a little bit of high-quality grip glue or properly applied safety wire, and experience what it actually feels like to ride a motorcycle without your hands going numb after 20 minutes. The motorcycle industry wants to sell you shiny, heavy trash because the profit margins are huge. I want you to ride better, ride longer, and stop damaging your own hands. Stop wasting your money.